Yes, welcome to Picture Line. My name is Luis Navarro. I'm from Fujifilm. I'm the senior product specialist here in Salt Lake City, here to present the new X-T3. Happens to be September 20th, special day you can pick up your camera. We have them both in silver and a black finish that most people are well known. What's new about the camera, we kept the same plastic look with the controls, the hole, the size. Now using what we have is our new backlit sensor that gives you ability to perform lower light instead of -1, now -3. With the new processor 4, also gives you a more enhanced performance, giving us 425 or 420 points of focus, ability to work faster on face detection and eye detection. So that's really terrific for folks who are shooting weddings and portraits or any type of sports, any of our lenses from wide to our telephoto lenses.
Hey Louis, does it keep the old look of the old X-Trans sensor though?
So we still have what our traditional is our film look. The film look is pretty much from our colors, from our generation of 85 years of our colors, black and white colors that were people familiar with, Velvia, Astia, Provia, and including our NPH that are more for portraits and weddings. And then we have our colors in black and white, that's monocolors that are acros. We have a sepia. So everything is kept as our signs that we're known for our colors and film days.
And something that I was learning a little bit more about, that you have something with the simulation mode right now too that changes like something else about those picture profiles too, isn't there?
So there is a new picture profile we called Interna. Interna has been part of our motion picture for many, many years that we introduced with the H camera. Interna is a cinematic look. It's a lower profile than our Astia, but gives you a little bit more contrast and color than our raw color or raw output.
Okay.
It's also gradable in the JPEG, but it's very beautiful on skin tones. Really nice on a wide dynamic range on your highlights and your shadows.
Okay. What I've been noticing too with like the camera in general, it felt like it got a little bit longer. Not quite like the XH1, yes, but a little bit longer.
And that's why a lot of times appearance, you really have to pick it up and feel there is just enhancement on the grip. We definitely put the same type of bigger dials as our H1. The grip, the booster grip has more of an enhanced grip. So it feels nicer when you have bigger lenses. And talking about bigger lenses, we have our new 200 2.0 that's going to be scheduled to ship in October. But I have it here. Anybody want to come by, I have it here for till 5 o'clock. If they could come and play with it. I have it hooked up on the H, but they wanted to play with it on the X-T3. More happy if we could put it on the X-T3 body. Talking about lenses too, I do have our Cine Lenses. These are MKX lens. We have our 50 to 135, T-stop at 2.9, and again 18 to 55. So they're equivalent to work together. It's a twin, equivalent weight size. So if you're working with a rig, you don't have to rebalance the two lenses when you're interchangeable. So they're totally designed to work. Same filter, same shade, 82. So if you work with a shade box, standard 82 will fit perfectly interchangeable together. So this is, I'm happy to show these to anybody who want to try it with the rig. We have a H1 on a rig right here, and if they want to play with it, great. We could try it, different lenses on that. So cinematic is a big part of our business from Fujinon Optics. They've been cinematic glass and broadcast lenses for 75 years and known throughout the whole world. And this is an opportunity to bring it into our X mount.
So with the Cine Lenses, one thing that's really nice that you're telling me about just the size compared to like the big cinematic, like yes, really big cinematic ones.
So the design does come from our Cabrio lineup. Cabrio lineup is a much larger Cine lenses that are used in the industry. Those vary from 20,000, 60,000 around that price. Bigger lens. What they've done is they made some lenses very affordable, but not losing the quality and the quality of the elements in a smaller package. So they're lighter, work much better for a mirrorless package, and for a lower price. They start at $4,000, and that's for the 18 to 55 and 50 to 135, about 4,300. So really a reduced price, and they get in the cinematic controls.
Okay.
That they will gain just on our larger Cabrios or Premieres.
Which is a nice feature, because one thing that you said that you have it with an H1 right, is that we have the IBIS, the in-body stabilization along
Correct.
with it and stuff.
Anybody who don't want to work with a gimbal, our IBIS does a really good job handheld walking around, especially if you need to go lighter package, walking around with your subjects, and able to keep up with your subject and doing a great job with the gimbal, keep it very smooth.
Yeah, which would be nice because now you have the smooth aperture adjustment,
yes,
along with like the window on the XH1 that you can actually see.
They're parfocal and there's no breathing, so your subject stays within the axis and within your zoom, no shift, and also has a built-in macro. So if you're working close, if you're doing product photography, food photography, it allows you to keep within that close-up of sharpness.
Okay, awesome. These are prime. This is the first time I've gotten to see these, and I just think that they're the beautiful thing. Because, like I mentioned, I was down in the Sony studios, and Sony's using Fujinon lenses and stuff like that too with them and stuff. So they're the perfection, the quality, the manufacturing of a Fuji lens.
Yeah, they're well known throughout the industry, and it's more on the PAL system. The way they're able to adapt to RE, Red, Sony, Panasonic. It's just the same type of mount that they able to adapt to those cameras.
Awesome. And then, so going back to the 200 millimeter f2 too, as I again, this is kind of new for me holding it and stuff like that, but the build quality is just amazingly nice, and I noticed that you have 3 customizable.
So these are some of the Prefocus locks that we introduced first a few months ago on the GFX on our first 250 f4 lens. So they did bring it into this model. They also comes with a 1.4 teleconverter, so it is bundled together. So from a 200/2.0, we'll create it to a 300/2.8. If you notice with the green band is because they're more influenced from the broadcast industry. The broadcast industry, they have their well-known green band across their name of Fujinon Optics, and so they're more influenced to the front elements. Really, the way they polish their optics, they have the same way. This is polished and coated from similar to the broadcast lenses, so they're more influenced to the system, and that's the reason we attached that green band to it.
Okay.
So it's super sharp, low light, very detailed. The way the optics on Fujinon optics are.
Well, great. Now, of course, I didn't get to play with it or anything like that too, but the OIS, what do you say is the stop
It's
range?
5 stops. 5 stops. So if you're working with the H, it will use a combination of stops between the body and the lens. So whatever determine the distance in your subject movement, it will use some of the 3 stops maybe in the body or 3 stops on the lens, and vice versa. They'll share the other 2 stops. Depends how your subject is moving in different axes of movement forward or aft.
And that's what I love about the Fuji line is, just the kind of the sharpness and the details too of the lens. I've been a Fuji shooter since the XE1, and I've noticed that about a customer that just came in and said that about his XE1 and the silver lining of that was my same thing as everyone thought it was a film camera.
And that's the compliments we get from, especially with my X100F walking around. Since it's a hybrid and it looks like a film camera, try to show them the rear that it's a digital display, and it's like, well, you fooled me. But it allows you to become very approachable to your subjects. It's not a very intrusive camera, so it allows you to get closer to your subject of taking their pictures.
Yeah. So what else did you bring here? So you got the teleconverter.
Teleconverters. Some of the features that were coming with the X-T3, the grip itself, and then the second lens for the MK.
Okay.
So those are the new products. The only thing I did not bring, it's floating around through the countries, our new XF X8 to 16. Since this is coming out in October, the 8 to 16 will be out in November. That's the only one right now. It's currently a pre-production. The 200, it is a production model. So I was hoping to get that one, but it's going through so many other
When's the release date that they're thinking about?
As closer we get to October, we'll have actual date itself.
Okay.
So my guess, and I'm just guessing, it's going to be roughly through the New York show. We'll announce it, the release date.
Okay.
So it might be early of October, but at the moment I have not been told. The only thing it's end of October for the 200, and 8 to 16 end of November. So just in time for the holidays.
Great. And the one thing that we don't see here too is that there's the black and white the black body X-T3, but now that comes in silver.
Right.
So and I'm looking at the 50 millimeter here that you have, the f2, and looking at it like a customer just bought the silver It looks great. It matches.
Yes. David, who just picked up his silver. Oh, here we go.
Oh, there we go.
We got the silver X-T3. So that's still, it's not that graphite silver. It's really, the silver really comes close to our lenses. And instead of doing the graphite, usually there's additional premium. On this X-T3 silver, it's the same price as our black finish. And they're actually available. You know, there's no waiting time for that product to release. It's released today. It's official.
Along with the black.
On the black. And a lot of people like the silver because it reminds them just like a film camera. And you could tie it with a silver lens or a black lens. It's just how they want to dress it up, their finish of the camera. But the finish is identical to the quality of the black finish camera.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of my old Fujica 705 camera. It's just the silver ring. That's one of my first cameras I started photographing in the 70s. One of the Fuji cameras back then.
That's what drew me into Fuji. Like everyone asked me, what drew me in first to Fuji. It's more or less like it reminded me of my analog film camera, and controlling my shutter speeds up here, but controlling my aperture around the lens was like a magical thing.
Yeah,
it was kind of like I pull out my film camera and I still have the same thing.
Some people call it old school, retro, very tactile. Mm-hmm. So when you're actually making those controls, you see the changes in the back display or electronic viewfinder. Instead of the processor making those changes for you, you're visually acknowledging that when I turn my shutter speed, my ISO, or my aperture, this is the effect. It gets lighter, darker, and that's a better translation to the operator that this is how what light works.
Yeah.
And, so they're making the effects, and they help understand more their, especially depth of field, their aperture, their shutter, and so by doing direct control, helps them learn more the photography.
Well, and that's another thing is I always use the depth of field scale, and I was like ecstatic when you guys have an electronic depth of field scale on the back of the camera, so I could actually see my range of focus that I was actually physically creating. And then they added it, of course, to the 14 millimeter, the 16 millimeter, and the 23, which is really nice. Which is just a kind of a nice one that you pull the lens back in the clutch and stuff.
Clutch, yes.
Yep. So I really like that feature of it. But again, for people that maybe are looking into the Fuji, and this might be their first Fuji, this was probably my thing that just brought Fuji to light to me is, here I'm shooting this smaller camera, this APS-C sensor with shooting full frame, and then I was amazed by the images coming out of it. Like, the pixelation looked more like grain to me.
Right.
And I think that coming from like new people are thinking about Fuji or wanting Fuji, the look is completely different with that X-Trans sensor.
And that is from our X-Trans sensor, because the Bear sensor has a steady pixel count, the same count from red to green and red or green to blue. What Fuji has done, they take some of their technology from their chrome films. Chrome films had color couplers, CMY. K was your black and white, or black pixel, or black silver, and they were random, and that's why it improved both having moire problems with, even with films, but with that same technology that went into the science, into our sensor. So that's why it mimics more of a film, because that's the design was. And instead of noise, it gives you more of a mimic of film, especially in higher ISOs. It looks cleaner than you would with noise of a Bear sensor.
Yeah, and you probably notice that more with people like shooting now more video, since Fuji's starting to focus a little bit more on video with the in-body stabilization and everything. So I think that's great, and that's what I love about the X-Trans. Like, I always show people like photos of the X-Trans sensor and just look at that compared to a regular RGB sensor, and it's like the CMOS sensor, and I'm like, now just look at it and stare at it, and what do you see? And it's kind of like, now you start to see more of the physical form of it, like a grain particle. So
it's one thing that Fuji has advantages. The days of film at manufacturers, Nikon, Canon, Leica, Mamiya, they just relied on the film manufacturer's codec of Fuji to produce color. So you kept the same camera for many years. You just waited for the new film styles to come out, and you never had to worry about changing stills or changing your sensors. But that's one thing that Fuji had many years of knowledge in bringing that science in colors. And one thing for one style, MPH, in our cameras, is our portrait films were designed. I could shoot a bride party, and there could be 5 in the bride party, and everybody has their own different complexion, color complexion, and it will produce that in your camera. It will not have a color bias. There's no shift, and that's why film photographers who shot weddings loved our film. Labs didn't have to really balance or play with any channels. They come out right off the film base, and that's the thing with our sensor. It comes off the film base, and they're so neutral that really you can shoot all JPEGs. You don't have to worry about shooting raw, especially when they're shooting 5,000, 10,000 images. Cuts down their post-production.
Yeah. And the Velvia simulation is just identical.
Yes.
It's like the saturation on it is just identical.
Yeah, you get the same hues in your fluorescent greens and your bright blues and your purples, your violets, and definitely your orange gives you that same identical brilliance on that.
Yeah.
Color and tonality.
Yeah. So let's just kind of go back to X-T3. So X-T3 is just, what people are driving and coming into for today and stuff. Like I said, and I mentioned like the body and stuff like that. Let's kind of focus on a little bit more of those internals, I'm going to say just kind of like with what we're looking at here.
So one thing we've been asked for quite some time is put in a head jack. So we added the head jack right next to the mic jack, and it's a 3.5.
Now, right?
Because of the new technology move into USB-C, it allows us to do faster transfers on tethering. Again, that same jack allows you to charge your battery through your same adapter you use for your phone, the fuel cell, or you had a car charger. You could plug it into your USB-C plug. HDMI mini, still the same. Also, because a lot of people are using not just L brackets, but also camera rigs like this. So it's very simple to remove the door. The door just pulls that down here, and they have easy access to your cables direct without the door interfering with the cage. And by placing this back in here, pulling your slide.
I'm watching this carefully because that's new
down.
For me.
There we go.
That's new for me.
It's upside down. I'm trying to do this upside down.
That's nice.
So what thing you notice we don't have there is our cable release. We actually added to the right side. So if you're doing L bracket, if you're doing any types of cage, it allows you more freedom access without binding the cable. So for landscape photographers, they're going to love that.
Okay.
It's just easy to get to. And we did release a new cable release with the Model 100, and it's a 2.5 cable, but they can use any 2.5 cable. But that should be available already because the previous models were the mini USBs that will connect. So we got away from that since we changed to the new USB-C. We added the independent now from.
And then we have our old school way of putting the old mechanical release, cable release.
And some folks I run into, they're using some really nice mechanical release cables. Or they're using their soft touch button to place on top. So they're dressing up their camera.
Okay. Card slots.
So the card slots are UHS-2s. I've already gone through some 300 read and write, and they work terrific. Since the new camera could do 300 frames per second, I shot a 64 gig card and 30 frames, and it shot continuous nonstop. It might have slowed down towards the end, maybe 20 frames, but it continued all the way to fill up the card. So that's the nice thing about UHS-2s, and plus the new buffer and processor able to take those images and put them into the card very quickly.
I remember the first time that was introduced is like you came in and we were just holding it down and it never slowed down.
Yeah, the X-T1 was the first camera to use the UHS-2 in the industry, and it took about another year or two before other cameras start using it. So finding those cards were a little bit difficult that time, but now they're becoming the norm. Especially if you're doing 4K video or high-speed sports, automotive races and things like that, you need the high speed. They work really well.
Well, and that's the one thing I wanted to kind of promote too with like it, because like we had the smaller headphone jack, and now it's 3.5 millimeter, which is great.
Yeah, and that way you don't have to use any adapters.
Exactly, so it doesn't stick out.
Correct.
Right into the camera and stuff. So that is a nice feature about the camera.
Also, what we've done is X-T2 had a 2.3 million dots. Now we actually added the same 3.7 million dots EVE. So for your Viewfinder is much brighter. You don't need the grip to get the 100 frames per second refresh rate. So it's a high definition, just like our GFX. So it's going to see very clear, very finite, very sharp, and very bright. That it's going to be very usable even for low light.
Yeah, and this could be my own analogy too, but like I shoot with the X Pro too, and when I come in here, I always look at the X-T2, the X-T3 now, the XH1, and I just love the viewfinder. And it's not just the quality, because it's like even the quality on the X-T2 was very similar to my X Pro 2. But it's the size. It's like when you look in that viewfinder, you just have space. It's like being in the back of a movie theater instead of being right up against the screen. So, and that's what I love. I mean, what can you kind of tell us about that?
So the previous viewfinder was 0.77. This one is 0.75, because you're working with a higher resolution. It is using the brightest technology to give you the high definition, the true color. With the new processor, we're now on the 4th generation. It allows you to work with those color channels very quickly and have less of a lag. So really now we're saying this camera has practically no lag when you're shooting from single frames up to your 11 to 14 frames. So that's part of the new viewfinder ability to work along with the processor to give you the colors, especially when working with low lights. If you're working with a wedding and low light reception, you actually probably can see more information than your naked, visible naked eye. So that's the nice thing about from going to -1 to -3 low lux. It's just more detail, more information, and faster focusing. Just able to connect really quickly to the lenses, what you see, what you get. And that's the beauty about mirrorless, is you see there is no surprises. When you take the picture and you view the image, they should be identical to the quality of the image.
And this is something that I want to know personally when I'm telling this to customers and stuff like this. With the battery, because it's the same battery.
Correct.
With the new processor, because usually processors help with cooling the camera down a little bit too and stuff like that. Does it help with a little bit more of that lifespan of that battery?
So the X-Trans 4th generation, and not just the 4th generation of the X-Trans, but also the 4th generation of processor, it's lower power consumption. So we're able to now get more out of the battery too, and keeping the heat low. So that's always going to recommend the new S battery on our current models. So you will have the ability to control the heat dispersion through the camera, both in high speed or doing 4K video.
Okay.
So pretty much the last 2 years, that's the only thing that's been available. But I know some folks who still have the older generations. I will say if they're going to shoot landscape, the current battery should be fine. They're using from their previous model. But if they're going to do anything that's going to be high speed or 4K video, I was going to recommend the faster battery. So when they buy the camera itself, it's always going to be that new battery.
The newer battery.
Yes.
How many roughly shots that you would get for anybody?
We were saying 390.
Okay.
It depends what you're using it for. I know if I'm shooting sports and I'm not really looking at the display, then I could go several hundreds.
Okay.
Maybe to 800, 900.
Record times.
Record times
for video.
Video 4K, it will take you up to 15 minutes. With the grip, you will get the full 30 minutes.
Okay. And I think that's important, because that's some things that people
And the video
know.
now, we have codec of 264, now we added the new 265. So it's just a different compression.
Okay. Okay.